As a parent, what comes to mind when you think of the word leader or leadership? And if you have children who are older and in their peer group, they are being assigned or stepping into or wanting people to vote for them in certain roles, maybe it's student government or it's class president or any of these other types of offices. Who are the kids that typically are called leaders? Maybe we have that right, and maybe we have that wrong. Stay tuned, and we're going to talk about that today and how you can grow superb leaders.
If your desire is to become spiritually stronger, emotionally healthier, and relationally smarter, you're at the right place. Speaker and writer Stephanie Smith inspires and equips you to achieve these three key aims. If you're a parent, you'll also learn how to raise empowered kids, ready for adulthood. Let's get started.
In her book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, author Susan Cain gives a rich and well thought out and documented look at how we have come to view leaders and leadership the way that we have here in the US. And she tracks back to how at one time in our culture, we were much more character driven. We didn't just look for character, but we taught that, we emphasized that, we prioritized that. And then that began to change, and it really became much more performance driven. And what we now think is just the norm and how it's always been actually is not. It's actually a pretty new way of looking at leaders and leadership, not just in world culture, but even in our world history, but even in the history of our own country here in the United States. Oftentimes, and I have seen this as both a parent and as an educator, we tend to assign leadership labels to children who have certain personality characteristics. Typically, they are more outgoing than introverted. They will have a certain charisma to them. And often they are surrounded by people. They have a wide network of friends. And if we are really courageously honest, a lot of times it also has to do with their personal looks. How tall are they? How much do they weigh? And I like to say that all of those things, we've eradicated all of those considerations. But the reality is we really haven't gotten there yet. We still have some more work to do with that in our culture. Well, today, what I want to talk to you about is that we reframe our mindset about leadership because our kids develop early, very early in life, their own assignment of labels as to what leaders look like and what leadership is. And that doesn't just stick with them for school and then they graduate from high school and whoop, voila, all of those labels and those mindsets fall off. They carry those mindsets without them into adult life. And I think that we are a poorer nation, and I don't just mean economically, but in terms of our culture because of this. So this isn't just some, oh yeah, well that's only, if you have kids that have certain type of personality or certain types of ages and you want to pay attention to this. I believe that developing a leadership mindset and leadership skills is something that we need to do for every child and not just based on their personality. So what do we look at if we're not looking at charisma, if we're not looking at how extroverted somebody is or how articulate that they are or how popular that they are? What things do we look at? Well, one place that we can begin, and this isn't the end all, but one place that we can begin is by looking at the leadership of Nehemiah. And specifically in today's episode, I'm pulling from the latter part of chapter 5, starting with verse 14 and going through verse 19. Now, the entire book of Nehemiah is just a fantastic manual on right leadership, on good, effective, meaningful, godly, righteous leadership, superb leadership. But today we're just going to focus on a little bit of what comes out of the end of chapter 5. Now, I went into more detail and I did a compare and contrast in the last episode looking at superb leaders versus harmful leaders. And what we're going to do today is I've just extracted a few of those principles on superb leaders to say, how can we apply this to raising our kids? How can we develop superb leadership practices and a mindset within them? So, we're going to look at a few of those today. The first one is superb leaders don't ask, what can I get, but what do I need? It's not only okay, but it's wise to have limits on what your children can have. And this isn't about a minimalistic lifestyle. I'm not knocking that, but I'm not saying that's not what we're talking about here. But we're talking about cultivating a mindset that says enough. It's not just about, well, what can I get? How much can I stuff into my closet? But what do I actually need here? And that is going to vary from person to person. I think that where we can get into trouble and we can actually end up inadvertently creating arrogance and pride, the wrong kind of pride in our children, is when we might, for example, say, well, you only are going to be able to have, 5 sets of clothing because that's really all you need. And if somebody else has 25 sets, well, look at them. I mean, clearly they're not about leadership. I mean, look how selfish and greedy they are. Listen, lifestyles are very different, and we don't want to get caught up in judgmentalism here. But we do want to understand that children don't develop by default a mindset that says, I have enough, I don't need any more. The default human tendency is always more, 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 more. All right, so how do we teach them this? Well, it begins when they're young, but don't despair, because if you're a little late coming to the game, that's okay. I mean, start where you are, not where you wish you had started. Where is enough clothing, toys, games, activities, days or nights away with friends, or engaged in other opportunities and things? And so you might begin with that by saying, how many toys does a child, really need in our lifestyle for this particular season of life? And you don't want to dump this out on your kid, like if they have been used to having, thousands of different toys. It's probably not too smart to just sweep in one day and all of a sudden say, hey, we're going to take this down to 8. Not a good plan here. You have to keep this in the context of what they're used to. Because if you do something like that, okay, you've got 45 tractors and I have decided that, a kid your age only needs 3. So, packing up the others. You're not going to end up creating a mindset of leadership that says, hey, I'm just going to be content with what I need and not everything I can get. You're going to end up creating something entirely different. But I trust that you have good common sense and you can understand what I'm saying here and what the focus here is. The reality is, if we don't teach this intentionally, we will end up with kids who can have a very consumeristic mindset and lifestyle. And the key here is mindset. It's not just about what somebody has, it's what they're focused on getting. It's not really going to do too much good if you take your kids' stuff and you whittle it down to just kind of the bare necessities. If the mindset behind it doesn't change for your child. So your end goal is not just decluttering your house. Your end goal here is to develop a leadership mindset that says, I'm going to approach things from the perspective of what do I need, not how much can I accumulate and how much can I take from others. A 2-week mission trip to a third world country can definitely introduce your kids to the needs of other people around the world. But don't mistake that that is going to have a greater impact than 50 other weeks of a consumerist lifestyle and mindset. If you see that this is an area in your child's life or maybe in your entire family's life that you're like, hey, you know what? I think we really need to do better than this. Probably the best place to begin is pick one area and start there. It's not to go through and address every single thing in your life, but just pick one area. Maybe it has to do with stuff like physical stuff, like clothing, toys, games. Maybe it has to do with activities. Maybe there's too many nights away with friends. Maybe there's just too many, they might all be good activities, but there's too many activities. So I would just pick one area to begin with and work on that for a period of time and then begin to work on another one. And don't just do this in darkness, especially as your kids are older. Talk to them about this and what you are wanting to accomplish. But remember this, our kids, it's more what is caught than what is taught. So you have to be practicing this in your own life, or all you're going to do is just irritate and annoy your kids because they're going to see that as being hypocritical if you're not practicing these things in your own life. Another principle that we saw in the last episode was that superb leaders lead by example. They get their hands dirty. They don't just tell everybody else what to do. They get into the thick of it themselves. Well, what character traits do you want your kids to have? Because these are developed through action, not information. The other day I had somebody that was working on my car, it needed some repair. And to his credit, he had his daughter with him. And she's I don't know exactly how old she is, but I think that she's maybe in middle school. And a beautiful daughter, and I told her, I said, "You know what? I said, it is a powerful combination to be a beautiful woman who also knows how to use tools. So good for you." I wanted her to be encouraged to know, hey, there is nothing wrong. As a matter of fact, there's something really smart for a woman and for a guy as well to learn how to work on a car, to take care of some of your own repairs and those types of things. Kids always need to have something to do that requires them to get their hands dirty, do the dishes, laundry, yard work, cleaning, food prep, cooking, errands, jobs, etc. And I don't just mean jobs that they're doing to earn money from other people. They just need to learn how to dig in because life takes work, like real physical work. And kids need to learn how to do that and not to think that they are being encroached upon or they're doing you a favor if they help do the dishes or they clean or they do the dishes or they do their laundry or cooking or any number of those types of things. So whether your kids are 2 or whether they are 17, they need to be doing something on a regular, ongoing basis. And the older they are, the more of it they need to be doing, where they're actually getting their hands dirty and they're involved in physical labor. Another principle we saw is that superb leaders create cultures where exploiting others isn't acceptable. Prepare your kids for the fact that there are people who will exploit others by pre-teaching them. Before your kids start an activity that involves others, whether it's virtual or physical, talk to them. And I don't just mean one conversation, but have conversations with them about what they may encounter and where there might be situations that someone could be bullied, harassed, exploited, and anticipate those things. Not that you know that they will respond, but you're just being honest or that you know that those things will occur, but just where you're preparing your kids for the opportunity or the possibility that those might occur so that you can teach them how to respond to that so they can go in with some amount of preparation into those situations. That also kind of dovetails into the next one, which is that superb leaders are compassionate. They know the needs and the situations of the people they are entrusted to lead. And so ask your kids, hey, what are the needs in your friends groups? What needs are you seeing in your school right now? What's going on in the church youth group right now of need that you see? Where do you see in your community, in your neighborhood, in whatever circles where your kids are involved with others? Talk to them about the needs of others. Show that to them. I have a friend who does this marvelously well. Every time I talk to her, she's in the process of cooking something that she's getting ready to take to someone, or she's taking someone out to lunch because she's just paid attention to, and she knows, hey, I think this person could use some encouragement. They could use some assistance, right now. And I know that that's been a powerful model for her child because that's just a part of how she lives. Kids will not become compassionate by default. It takes intentionality, not to tell them that they should be, but to put the things into practice so that they actually become those people, not just have an awareness that they're supposed to have compassion, but it actually grows within them. Another principle that we saw was that superb leaders prioritize transparency, not privacy. Now, I've raised 5 sons, and I understand that as kids grow up, that there is an appropriateness that they need to become more private in their lives. I understand that. Obviously, it would be totally inappropriate to expect a child who's 16 to not have any more privacy in any area of their life than if they are 6 or they're 6 months. I mean, there's clearly a difference there. But we have a culture that has so told our children that they are entitled to this such a degree of separation from their parents as well as other adults that it really has left them in very dangerous and vulnerable places. And many children have paid the price for that. And that's not just their own fault, it's because as a culture, and oftentimes as parents, we have bought into that lie as well. One of the lines that I have, one of them in one of my messages from parents is that your kids have a greater need for integrity than a right to privacy. Your kids will always need to be people of integrity. And integrity always has with it a component of transparency. You cannot have a person with true integrity if they're not a person with great openness and appropriate transparency. If you see somebody who is very resistant to appropriate transparency, then you really have a serious red flag about their integrity. And kids need to learn that they have a greater need for integrity than they do a right to privacy. And the last practice that we saw here is that superb leaders can and do invite God's examination and request his favor and blessing. And you know what? We want our kids to know that. And not just as it relates to God, but even for us. Now, I'm not talking here about when kids want stuff from us because, hey, we want to borrow the car, or, we want you to throw us a party, or, hey, we need some more money. But we want to create a culture where our kids know there's nothing wrong with desiring and asking for affirmation. That's really what we see here at the end of chapter 5 is Nehemiah is saying, God, I want your affirmation. I want you to know and to recognize and to affirm that I have done the work here to be faithful and to lead with integrity and to do what's right. And we want our kids to know that they can do that with us and they also can do that with God. All right, my friend, Well, keep up the great work of raising kids to be spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart. And some help with that, if you haven't already, hop over to the website, stephaniepresents.com, sign up for the weekly newsletter, High Impact, check out speaking engagements. And hey, would you leave a rating and a review for the podcast? That really helps other people to say, hey, this is worth my time and attention as well. And most of all, remember this, my friend, you have an impact that is immeasurable, eternal, and irreplaceable. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. Visit the website, stephaniepresents.com, and sign up for High Impact to join the mission of building spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart women and families. You can also book Stephanie to speak at your event and check out additional resources. Together, we can invite and equip generations to engage fully in God's grand story.